She mocked me in front of everyone, calling me just an admin like it was something to be ashamed of. People around us laughed while she proudly showed off her new fiancé. Then he turned to me and politely asked what I actually did for work. I calmly answered with just one word. The room suddenly went silent, her parents' faces turned pale, and in that moment, she finally realized who I really was. I am Abigail Matthews, 32 years old, and currently, I am standing in a shadowed corner of my sister Hannah's engagement party, watching her flaunt a diamond ring that costs more than most people's annual salary. To the sea of faces in this backyard, I am the quiet younger sister, the unachievable shadow, the administrative assistant who probably spends her days filing papers and fetching coffee. Nobody here knows that I am the youngest judge appointed in our district in 50 years. To my family, my career is a footnote, but to the legal world, I am a force to be reckoned with. Hannah just mocked my professional life in front of her fiancé, Nathan, a prominent attorney who has no idea that the woman he is patronizing is the same one who holds his legal motions in the palm of her hand. If only she knew we had already met in my courtroom, and that the silence following my one-word response was about to change everything. Growing up with Hannah was like living in a state of perpetual eclipse. She is 5 years my senior, and from the moment I could crawl, she was the undisputed center of our universe. In the Matthews household, Hannah's achievements were celebrated with a literal fanfare, while mine were acknowledged with the kind of polite, distracted nods you give a stranger at a bus stop. When Hannah got the lead in the school play, my mother, Elizabeth, would call every relative in the phone book to announce the news. When Hannah was accepted to 3 colleges with full scholarships, my father, Robert, beamed with a pride that seemed to illuminate the entire house. Don't get me wrong, my parents are good people. They provided us with a comfortable, upper-middle-class life in suburban Boston, but they never quite mastered the art of celebrating 2 daughters equally. Hannah was loud, confident, and demanded the spotlight. I was quieter, more reflective, and content to observe. In our home, the squeaky wheel didn't just get the grease, it got the gold medal and a victory parade. I vividly remember bringing home a report card of straight A's in middle school, my heart racing with the hope that tonight might be my turn for a special dinner. But that same afternoon, Hannah had been selected for a regional debate team. My report card sat forgotten on the kitchen island, while the dinner conversation revolved entirely around Hannah's rhetorical prowess. AB's always been the easy one, my mother would tell her friends, as if requiring less maintenance somehow made my hard work less worthy of recognition. By the time I reached high school, I had developed a thick skin. I stopped looking for validation at the dinner table and started finding it in the courtroom. I joined the mock trial team and discovered a passion for the law that burned brighter than any need for a parental pat on the back. When I finally announced my intention to attend law school, my parents' response was lukewarm. Law school is expensive, honey, my father cautioned, and it's such a competitive field. They didn't raise those concerns when Hannah pursued a master's in marketing. They just opened their checkbook and cheered. The pattern of my life became one of quiet excellence. While Hannah shared embellished stories of her marketing successes, I kept my mouth shut about mine. It wasn't that I wasn't proud, I was. But years of having my accomplishments minimized had taught me that it was simply easier to fly under the radar. The great administrative assistant misunderstanding happened 3 years ago. I had just passed the bar and was working as a clerk for Judge Thompson. At a family Thanksgiving, I mentioned I was assisting the judge. My Aunt Sandra immediately assumed I meant I was a secretary. Before I could even draw a breath to clarify, Hannah jumped in with a smirk. That's right, AB's answering phones and making coffee for some judge, she said, her smile never reaching her eyes. But we all have to start somewhere, right? The sting of the comment was sharp, but a weary part of me decided not to correct her. I wanted to see how long it would take for anyone to actually ask me a direct question about my life. They never did. So, the lie became the truth. While they thought I was organizing files, I spent 5 years as a prosecutor with a near-perfect conviction rate. My reputation for being fair but tough earned me respect throughout the Boston legal community. When Judge Thompson retired, he personally recommended me as his replacement. At 30, I became a judge, a fact reported in every major legal journal, yet never mentioned at a single Matthews family gathering. For 2 years, I kept my robe in my chambers and my secret in my heart. Sometimes I'd imagine revealing the truth at dinner, picturing the way their forks would hit their plates in shock. But I never did, until Hannah's engagement party pushed me to the edge. The party was exactly what I expected: extravagant, meticulously planned, and designed to showcase Hannah's perfect life. My parents' colonial home had been transformed into a Pinterest-worthy venue with twinkling fairy lights and professional catering. A massive banner reading "Congratulations, Hannah and Nathan" hung over the garden entrance. I arrived early to help, mostly out of a sense of duty. "Oh, Abby, you're here," my mother said, barely looking up from a floral arrangement. "Can you help set up the drink station? Hannah wants everything perfect for Nathan's parents." I nodded and began arranging crystal glasses. This was my role, the helper, the background character. As the guests arrived, I retreated to a quiet corner. "Still working as a secretary, Abby?" Uncle Frank asked, patting my shoulder. "Nothing wrong with honest work." I corrected him automatically, calling it administrative support, the lie now second nature. Aunt Patricia squeezed my arm. "Don't worry, dear. Not everyone can have Hannah's drive." At precisely 6 o'clock, a sleek black BMW pulled into the driveway. Hannah had arrived with Nathan Carter. I knew of Nathan. He was a respected defense attorney who had argued several cases in my courtroom. However, I always wore a full robe and kept my hair pulled back in a severe bun on the bench. In a cocktail dress with my hair down, I was invisible to him. Hannah made her entrance like a queen, her diamond ring catching every spark of light as she waved her hand dramatically. Nathan walked beside her, handsome and tailored, looking slightly embarrassed as Hannah paraded him around, shouting his credentials to anyone who would listen. My cousin Jessica, the only person who knew the truth, slid up beside me. "How's her honor this evening?" she whispered. I smiled gratefully. "Enjoying the show?" Jessica nudged me. "You know, you could end this charade right now and steal her thunder." I shook my head. "I'm not that cruel." But before we could continue, Hannah sailed over with Nathan in tow. "Jessica, have you met Nathan?" she asked, then turned to me. "And of course, you remember my little sister, Abby." Nathan extended his hand. "Hannah's told me about you. It's nice to finally meet." As we shook hands, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. For a second, I thought the game was up, but his expression cleared. "Abby works as an admin for some law office," Hannah added dismissively. "Nathan probably knows more prestigious firms she could apply to." Nathan gave me an apologetic glance. "I'm sure Abby is quite capable of managing her own career." Throughout the evening, Hannah's needles continued. Every time she mentioned my coffee-making skills, Nathan's brow furrowed deeper. By the time dinner was served on the patio under the glowing lights, the tension was thick. My father stood to make a toast, praising Hannah's ambition. Then Hannah stood, demanding the table's attention. "Nathan has some exciting news," she announced. "He's too modest, but he just won a 7-figure settlement against Bradford Pharmaceuticals." I knew that case. It had been in my courtroom. I remembered Nathan's skillful arguments. He had earned that win. But then Hannah looked across the table at me, her eyes gleaming with a familiar cruelty. "Not everyone can handle high-pressure careers," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Some people are better suited to supporting roles, right, Abby?" She asked me how long I'd been an admin. 3 years, I replied quietly. Nathan was staring at me now, his eyes wide, his memory finally connecting the dots. "Abby?" he asked carefully. "What exactly is your position?" The table went silent. Hannah's smug smile remained frozen. I took a deep breath, looking my sister right in the eye. "Judge," I said. The single word fell like a gavel in the high-pressure silence of the patio. "Judge." The sound of it seemed to vibrate against the crystal glasses and the expensive silverware, a sharp, undeniable strike of reality that fractured the curated perfection of Hannah's engagement party. Nathan's face went completely still, his eyes widening as the professional fog lifted, and he finally saw the woman who had presided over his most grueling legal battles. "Judge Matthews," he whispered, the name carrying a weight of sudden, immense respect. "Northern District Court. You handled the Bradford case. I've argued in your courtroom at least 6 times. Hannah's smile didn't just fade, it disintegrated. She looked between Nathan and me, her face contorting with a mixture of disbelief and a rising, frantic anger. That's impossible, she stammered, her voice hitting a shrill note that drew the attention of every guest within earshot. Abai is an administrative assistant. She's told us that for years. She's making this up for attention, Nathan. Tell them she's lying. But Nathan didn't look at her. He was staring at me as if seeing a ghost. She isn't lying, Hannah. Your sister is one of the most respected legal minds in the city. I just never made the connection without the robe. The revelation ripple-effected through the table. My father set his wine glass down with a heavy thud, his face pale. You're an actual judge? He asked, his voice sounding small and hollow. My mother's eyes filled with tears, her hands trembling as she clutched her napkin. Why wouldn't you tell us something so important, Abby? Before I could find the words, Uncle Frank, who had spent the last hour pitying my clerical job, cleared his throat. I think it's fairly obvious, Elizabeth. You and Robert never paid much attention to Abby's accomplishments. My father started to protest, but the words died in his throat, lacking any real conviction. The party didn't just stall, it died. Hannah, unable to bear a spotlight she wasn't currently standing in, hissed that I had found a way to make her night about me. She threw her silk napkin onto the table and stormed into the house, trailing a wake of bitter silence. Nathan offered a quick, pained apology and followed her, leaving the rest of us in a graveyard of a celebration. One by one, guests began to make their excuses. As they left, their tone had shifted from condescending pity to a strange, awkward reverence. By the time I walked to my car, the weight of 3 years of deception and a lifetime of being overlooked felt like a physical burden on my shoulders. The following morning, my phone was a battlefield of missed calls and texts. My parents were desperate to talk, but the one person I truly expected to hear from, Hannah, remained silent. I spent the day in a hollow limbo until my doorbell rang at noon. It was Nathan, looking weary and out of place in my modest hallway. He had come alone. As we sat over coffee, the air between us was thick with the strange irony of our positions. He told me he should have recognized me sooner, but admitted that Hannah's description of me, a lost little sister who needed protection, was so far removed from the formidable Judge Matthews that his brain simply couldn't bridge the gap. Then, Nathan dropped a second bombshell. Hannah's own life was a house of cards. She wasn't the high-flying marketing director she claimed to be. She was a mid-level manager who had fabricated a promotion to keep up appearances. The irony was suffocating. We had both been lying, I to hide my light, and she to invent a son that didn't exist. Nathan admitted he was reconsidering the engagement, not because of the career, but because of the cruelty he saw in Hannah when the truth came out. I found myself defending her, telling him that people say things they don't mean when they are cornered, but he only shook his head. Even then, he noted, you're defending the sister who never defended you. Later that afternoon, the sister in question appeared at my door. Without her designer armor and meticulous makeup, Hannah looked smaller, younger, and deeply vulnerable. She told me Nathan wanted to postpone the wedding, and for the first time, the bite was gone from her voice. We sat on my couch, the silence heavy with 30 years of unspoken hurt. Why didn't you tell us? She asked. I asked her if it would have even mattered. She cried then, admitting that she felt she had to be exceptional just to have value, while I was always the smart one. It was a perspective I had never considered. We had both been trapped in roles, the pretty one and the responsible one, and we had both let those roles poison our sisterhood. The week that followed was a blur of uncomfortable transitions. My parents reached out daily, their apologies laced with the hurt of being excluded from my real life. 10 days after the party, my mother called, pleading for a Sunday dinner to clear the air. I agreed, though the thought of it made my stomach knot. When I arrived at their home, the familiar scent of pot roast felt like a trap. We sat around the table, the tension of fifth guest at the meal. My mother tried to keep things light, but my father, using her first name in a rare display of gravity, insisted we have it out. Hannah didn't waste time. She accused me of calculating the revelation to humiliate her. I told her the truth. I hadn't planned anything. I had simply reached my breaking point after years of her mockery. The argument escalated, years of resentment bubbling over the edge of the dinner plates. Hannah screamed that I had always been jealous of her, but I just laughed. It was an incredulous, tired sound. Jealous, Hannah? I asked. You're the one who spent years putting me down just to feel superior. You're the one who couldn't handle the fact that I didn't need your permission to succeed. My mother tried to interject, but Hannah was on a roll, her face flushed with a lifetime of perceived slights. "You were always the perfect one," she yelled. "Why can't you be more like Abby?" That's all I ever heard. I looked at my parents, who were watching their two daughters unravel. The roles we had played for so long were finally being stripped away, leaving nothing but the raw, jagged truth of a family that didn't actually know itself at all. The realization hit the room like a physical blow. Hannah's confession that she had spent her life feeling like the problem child in the wake of my straight-A perfection left my parents reeling. We realized that in the Matthews household, there were no favorites, only two daughters who had both managed to feel like the less-loved child. Nathan's quiet observation that we had both created internal narratives that didn't reflect reality finally broke the cycle. For the first time, Hannah admitted she had lied about her promotion to director because she couldn't bear to disappoint the family when I was so seemingly perfect. We stared at each other, two sisters who had spent decades envying a version of the other that didn't even exist. My parents acknowledged their unintentional role in this game of comparisons, and the evening ended not with a resolution, but with a beginning. The carefully constructed masks we wore had crumbled, making way for something authentic. As Hannah left, she whispered a sincere apology, admitting she didn't know how to be my sister without competing. I told her we could figure it out together. 3 months later, the landscape of our family had shifted. Hannah and Nathan postponed their wedding to work on their relationship and her own self-worth. My parents became comically careful about balancing their pride, and I finally stepped fully into my identity. My father even sat in the back of my courtroom during a hearing, beaming with a pride he no longer felt he had to hide. Hannah and I now meet for coffee every other Sunday. The former edge in her voice has softened into a genuine curiosity about my life. She recently told me she's working on a legitimate development plan at work to earn the director title she once claimed to have. We aren't best friends yet, too much history lies between us, but we are no longer enemies. I've also started mentoring young women in the law, like a brilliant associate named Zoe who asked how I became so confident. I told her the truth, I wasn't always. I spent years hiding my light to avoid the jealousy of others, only to realize that staying small helps no one. Confidence is knowing your value. Arrogance is needing others to acknowledge it. At my parents' anniversary dinner last week, Hannah handed me a glass of wine and mentioned seeing my name in a legal journal. She told me she wasn't surprised I was called one of the most promising judicial minds of my generation. "I'm proud of you, Abby," she said, the words finally free of cost. Lancing the wound of our resentment was traumatic, but necessary. I've learned that authentic relationships can only be built on the truth. I spent years allowing myself to be underestimated to make others comfortable, but I finally understand that you never need to make yourself smaller to help someone else grow.